What would you say is the, in general terms, the importance of a storyboard in your way of creating films?
I think it works on two levels. It's first, when we're writing the thing, when I sit down and try to imagine the film, I start drawing it. And lots of new ideas come out of the very business of drawing, just by drawing it and seeing and making compositions. And, oh, that's an idea. And things start growing, so that we start changing the script as I'm storyboarding the thing. And then when we start shooting, it's the one thing that I can lock onto, because I usually go crazy when I'm shooting and trying to remember this, trying to remember that. With the storyboard, I know I've got to get those shots, boom, 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 there's all of these. And so I can shoot out of sequence, I can leap all around the place, which drives the crew crazy sometimes. I mean, in Time Bandits, the battle at the end with the forces of evil against the Time Bandits, constantly special effects weren't working, and I'd have to suddenly change and say, okay, forget about shooting the tank, let's go and shoot this. And because I had it all storyboarded, I could say, okay, we'll do that shot. And you're looking left to right, there's this happening, I do it and then cross it off. And I knew by going through it and crossing each one off that I was getting the sequence. And the crew said, you're crazy, I mean, this is never going to cut together. And I said, of course it'll cut together. And put it down, and it all went together, and they were amazed. I mean, the original idea was, we were starting on all this miniature solar system, 18th century, clicking away, and then the Earth came towards us and blew up, and then there was a mouth of a cannon. But what's actually in the film, it's like, there we've got a cannon firing, it says second unit, so I know, okay, it's going to go to Michele Soave. This is the opening sequence, and then we shot, somebody's blowing up their face, cannon, boom, bang. And you shoot all that, and then afterwards you could edit it any way you want, because you don't have to be stuck to it. And then this is the opening shot of pulling back from the city, back to the camp. Now that's basically the shot we've got. Now, I did that very early on. All we had found was the bay. And I do that, and there's the tents. Everything's there. Nothing has really changed. We had a whole opening sequence with Turks eating food and throwing it up to a seagull. But that's out of the film. There's a man falling horse's head. And then we come up to the statue in the square. There used to be people hanging. All of that's out. They're in the background somewhere. But it's sort of detail that gets built into the film that doesn't become foreground detail. But the idea was that we panned down to the poster saying Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Now, in the original storyboard, it's at the base of these gallows. I changed all that and just stuck it on the base of the statue. It seemed a nice idea that this heroic statue had been completely covered with bureaucratic posters and rules and regulations. And in the midst of all of that is this poster. So that was something that grew out of the statue. The film's sort of in my head. It's like I close my eyes, I can see the film, so I just start drawing that. It's going on, and that's the way it starts happening. And it's trying to imagine the film. So I've seen the film before we make it. And the storyboard is just taking this imaginary image that's in my head and getting it on paper. My sketches on the storyboards get less and less definite as I do it now, and they're very crude and very fast because I don't want it to become too specific. I want to have enough information that I can understand it, and hopefully others in the crew can understand it, because oftentimes we put a big board up on the set with the storyboard for what we're shooting that day, so people can walk by and look and say, that's what is going on. And that helps sometimes, again, to communicate to people what it is we're doing that day.
Is it always shot by shot? I mean,
yeah, it tends to be. And, I'll do, a frame, there's that happening, and then we pan to that frame. And I draw a little arrow saying we pan, or we do a pullback. And so when we do pullbacks, I do, close-up, mid, and wide shots, so you get a sense of the camera movement. When we actually get shooting, it does become much more flexible. I mean, I've got a shot of 3 people standing there, and we're doing the scene. Suddenly it's nicer to have them moving. So okay, I change it, they're moving, but I still know I need a shot of the 3 people. That's the main thing. sometimes the dangerous thing is sometimes I get too rigid about it and rely on the storyboard rather than on the scene that's taking place in front of us. And that's the danger of it. You can, if you're getting nervous or insecure, you can hide behind the storyboard too often. As I do the storyboard, as I continue through the film, by the end it's just little squiggles because I've gotten bored or run out of time. I mean, like the Munchausen storyboard is very much like that. The first part of the film is very, very carefully drawn, and then as it goes on, they're just just scratches. Because I was running out of time. I had to start working, and it's dangerous because sometimes I was just enjoying drawing these things, and it was something I was making illustrations rather than a storyboard. But sequences like, say, in Munchausen, the opening with the statue and with the head of the horse, that came out of drawing something. I actually started drawing an equestrian statue. Oh, this looks better without the head on. And once you've got the idea, the head's off the statue, then let's have the head on the floor, and it's got to be a big head, and people are living in the head. So that's something that came out of a drawing, because in the first drawing was that of a headless horse, a headless statue with the baron's head gone and the horse's head gone. It's surprising how, like, the production department, this isn't the producer, these are the people that are just making things possible. Again, how much that helps them. They can see, that. So Gustavus blows now. We got Sally in there, we got Gustavus, and there's real smoke, and all that information is there. Because I don't know, they don't seem to think as specifically as that. Mm-hmm. And I like, this is an instant where I just drew an extra one. I knew I needed an extra shot, so I quickly just drew it on this piece of paper, stuck these down, and said, all right, we got to do those. Gargoyle head breaking up. That was because when we shot the first gargoyle, it didn't work. So we had these other shots, but we didn't have, and to get around the shots, I said, okay, we'll do a quick one of the gargoyle head breaking up. So I draw it on a piece of paper, hand that in, and say, we've got this work to do. This is like shots to pick up. Last grain of sand falling, Albrecht straining with the chains, a close-up, mouse being held by the tail, mouse ball flying through the air, mouse down to the elephant's foot, mouse at the foot, cannonballs in the air. I don't know how that works. I've never understood where the idea comes from, whether the mind has it, whether it's out in space and these are antennae, aerials that get it, or whether it's the muscles in my fingers because they're drawing a certain way, they create something, and it's one of the great mysteries. I don't know where it comes from.
So for you, storyboarding is more than just preparing the film. I mean, ideas can come.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, that's like, I mean, we're doing Watchmen, and I haven't started storyboarding yet. And what's interesting is there's the comic book, which is a storyboard in itself, and it has an awful lot of information in it. But I know that the minute I start drawing it, things will happen. You start a dialogue with the drawing. I think that's, if you're a painter, that's what happens. And in a sense, you're always having that dialogue. When you're shooting, there's the set around you, and it changes what your idea from the storyboard. Ooh, then we could do that and that. And you've always got to be responding to those things. But ultimately, it's the storyboard becomes my insurance policy. Whatever, if I run out of ideas on the set, I can always go back to the storyboard, just do that, and I'll have a film at the end of the day. It's often the easiest thing to communicate to a lot of people that you've got a drawing, and that's what happens in it. And it gives them ideas, whether it's costumes or sets or you know, the cameraman. Say, oh, you've drawn that one. There's a window. Why don't we put the window over there? And then we could light it that way. And then we get into a discussion about that. So suddenly we've redesigned something, and then I try to put that in. It's I just forgot the question.
To whom do you show?
Who do I show it to? Yes, that's it. Yeah, and so that was terrible. I just drifted away into another world. I just, the point of that storyboard is that it's accessible to everybody. So anybody can come and look at it if they want to. And this is what's frustrating, is when we put it up on these boards when we're shooting, it's for the whole crew to look at it. And they don't look at it most of the time because people aren't used to working like that. It's one of the thing that drives me crazy in films is there's an awful lot of secrecy. People like to protect their little bit. And I don't want to do that. I want to get, because I know I'm very bad at communicating what I really want, and so the more things I can put out there for people to see, maybe they'll understand, that's what he's talking about. Or when he says big, that's what he means by big. I mean, it's 300 million miles tall, not 30 inches tall. And it helps communicating that way.
When you say everyone, does it include the actors?
Yeah.
And to what extent? I mean, do you use the storyboard?
Well, sometimes we'll go through a scene, we'll go through a scene and we'll talk through the scene, and I'll say, see, I've got this idea, boom, boom, boom. It would work like that. It doesn't always work that way, but it always is useful to, because we read the scenes out, and I say, well, what I'm thinking of doing here is, we'll track across here, we'll do that, and we'll get an angle from there, these things, and I can show it to them and say, that's what it is. And they understand, they're going to be this tiny little dot in the scene, so they don't have to worry about acting too much. That's a close-up. They can see big head there. And then I'll act during that shot. What's interesting on the moon sequence, originally they were floating along with water and their hands dragging in it, and we pull back. We cut to a wide shot of the boat, which sails across, and as it goes through shot, the water drains away, and then we cut the hand. Now, we started to prepare for that, and it just became too big and complicated, and so we did that top shot, looking down, which is one of the really nice shots in the film. Now, that's not in here, but it starts from talking about how you do this shot, and how big a set you have to build, and the fact we can't afford that, so, well, if we look down, then it's going to cost less money, and the shot comes out of that. And so that's what's wonderful, because that's the part of it that's really exciting, is when you're forced to come up with an idea that isn't what you originally saw, but in fact is better, and it takes care of all of those shots. It's just, the original moon city the whole moon sequence was totally different, gigantic. The way with a set designer, you just start talking. I mean, I usually have a lot of ideas, and I do a lot of research and bring in paintings and photographs and things that I've spotted at a location. I say that's interesting, and I again accumulate a lot of material. And sometimes I've actually drawn the thing, and then we start talking, and then the designer starts drawing his drawings of it, and then we start arguing. I say, no, do like this, more of that, less of that, that bigger, that smaller. You got totally wrong, forget about it, do this. Let's stop talking, just do what I ask to be done. And then, like in the theater, this is very much what was there. It was a shot of all this machinery, and the back of the sun rises up, and it revealed the audience. Now, we actually shot that, but it didn't work very well, so we've got just the sun rising, and then we've got a shot from the front as the sun rises. So that was something that was changed on the day, but we end up with basically a big shot of the theater, looking out somewhere in there. A lot of things change when you start editing, and you realize that the way I'd planned it wasn't quite right.
Do you sometimes include technical details or comments in your storyboards? And if yes, if so, which one?